Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy Barlo.b.theorizing, and welcome back to the Barlo Zone, home of the one and only demon hunter King KAIDO himself sent to Azeroth. How's everybody doing today? I hope y'all are having a great day, and I'll be honest, I'm excited to talk about this one because I get to talk about King KAIDO himself. Ah, and more specifically, as I'm sure everybody kind of already gathered from the thumbnail, his connection with Shanks at Marineford. Because after reading chapter 1157, I found it quite interesting. And I really tried not to let myself go down the Amazon lily path again. But the more I thought about that panel with Newgate and Kaido, I really love it. I don't know. It lives rent free in my head. But I did end up kind of forced. I don't know. It wasn't anything that happened in the community. It wasn't anything that happened in the chapter. It's just kind of how my brain works. Sometimes when I get stuck on something, I start diving in. And, I had a lot of thoughts kind of spawned from that panel. But the one I found to be the most intriguing was the reminder and kind of callback to Marineford that is implied there. And sorry, leaning all up close. Hope you guys like the hat. What I'd like to talk about is Shanks. As much as I really want it to be a Kaido centric discussion, the Kaido part is going to be rather short at the beginning. I wanted to make sure, because anytime somebody talks about Shanks, this is a beloved character, somebody, a large portion of the fan base, at least, I didn't get a lot of results, but I did run a few polls, and about 87% of the fan base, really loves this character, backs him, stands behind him, just like his crew, right? So you want to make sure you show the respect and get into all the details that matter, because you don't want to imply or implicate somebody without having the evidence, right? And let me be clear, I'm not here. Shanks isn't on trial. I will be up front, and I'll probably put a timestamp up here if all you would rather prefer seeing the results of my deep dive. But spoiler alert, I'm not off the Shanks bandwagon. I still love the man. I still have respect for him, but there's a little more to it than just I'm a Shanks supporter. So, as promised, I did want to start with the Kaido angle because this panel's really done a lot to my brain, right? And the fact that both of these men, I guess Kaido, both of these people were Rocks pirates is relevant to the discussion, right? They have a history together. The fact that Whitebeard was the one that recruited Kaido to begin with, and this panel seeming to imply that even 2 years later, after everything they've been through, Kaido still has respect for Newgate and his powers. And I do apologize if going back and forth between Newgate and Whitebeard bugs you. I don't know. There's not a lot of consistency. It's more like whatever my brain's thinking in the moment. But even beyond that, around the time we were introduced to Kaido, I actually think it was when we were introduced to Kaido, I'll have the panel up here. He was lamenting the fact that he couldn't die, and more notably, praising the fact that old man Whitebeard did it right. So the respect seemed to have continued even post dissolvement of the Rocks pirates, right? So, long story short, because, oh no, my apologies. I guess there was one more part, and it's the kind of the results of Wano that gave this one away. And it's the fact that Kaido has loyalty to people who maybe he feels indebted to, right? Like, Big Mom saved his life during the God Valley incident. And kind of as a result of that, we got the Big Mom Kaido alliance on Wano, which ended up being pretty terrifying for, everybody. And I do mean everybody, as we'll get into a little bit later. But the long and the short of the Kaido bit is that from evidence that we have, there doesn't seem to be any reason to believe the rumor that was floating in the One Piece world at the time, that Kaido was on his way to Marineford to ambush Shanks. Hey, sorry about that. Had the doggos barking. They thought somebody was here. But now I am going to be spending a good portion of this video on the Shanks bit. I'm going to have to do a little bit of a cut later because I've got to scroll to another page on my laptop. But I want to start with the obvious fact. Shanks was a Rogers pirate, right? And the Rogers are notably the historical rivals of the Rocks pirates. At least they've been pitted against each other more often than they've been pitted in a situation that may allude to the potential of a team up, right? Like, they fight more than they do anything else together. But notably, Shanks was a baby when this rivalry came to a climax, right? Like when the God Valley incident went down, Rocks ultimately met his fate. Shanks was just being found as a baby at the time, assumedly as the Rogers pirates were getting ready to leave the island. They found this treasure chest with this infant in it. And Rogers, in his all-knowing glory, decided, hey, let's take this baby on this dangerous pirate adventure with us. It's going to be fun, guys. And to kind of continue on with that idea, Rogers survived the incident, right? They always say history's written by the winners. And Rogers was always kind of a man that was, to quote one of the biggest disappointments in my eyes, looking towards the future like the Attack Titan, right? Like, he never really spent an incredible amount of time worried about what had already happened because there were grander things on the horizon that kept his attention, most notably finding Laugh-Tale in the One Piece. So Rogers, aside from not really living in the past, probably wouldn't have spent too much time talking about what happened with Roxy's Zabek, because even though he did have this respect for some of Rox's crew, I mean, one is some. I know all we can confirm is Whitebeard, so don't berate me too bad, please. But one is some. I don't know if Rogers would be compelled to really waste too much time talking about this pirate who, to his knowledge, is no longer a threat, is no longer a thing, is no longer relevant, really, right? He doesn't stand in the way of the dream anymore. He's already been dealt with. Why spend time talking about what happened with him, So, because of all this, Shanks kind of inherited a little bit of that respect for himself, at least to the point where Shanks would go on to respect Old Man Whitebeard himself, and they became rivals in their own right, Yeah, they'd drink together, they'd hang out, they'd party, but they'd always have their little sparring sessions, and gave us one of the cooler panels of the series, the initial sky-splitting clash. Man, they are convinced somebody's at the door. I can't hear what's around me outside these headphones. It doesn't sound like anything, so I'm gonna just keep going with it. And I think the rivalry with Whitebeard is notable because Shanks is kind of pitted as this all-powerful hockey master, right? Like, he doesn't need a devil fruit because he's mastered the ability to make them irrelevant. Like, it comes down to If you can't beat Shanks, it was a skill issue. That's the long and the short of it. He makes you fight with your human abilities, more or less, yeah. And even with Kid, like he saw, Kid was about to do his big old ultimate. Oh, damned punk. That's what it was. He was about to damned punk Shanks' entire fleet, and Shanks out, nah, I ain't about to mess around with letting this happen. I will do my own ultimate attack, full counter, Meliodas style, skadoosh with the Poe. I find it hard to believe he would have struggled with pre-time skip Whitebeard with how strong we are intended to believe he is, right? So I was left with the question of why did Shanks get involved? And I kind of concluded, I guess, that the lack of a flashback during Wano, the lack of any clarity on what happened between Kaido and Shanks that day, pretty much guarantees that it wasn't a let's make a deal situation, you taking case one or you taking case two. It was a we come to blows. The red hair pirates won a straight up battle, at least to the point where Kaido said, nah, F this stuff, I'm out. Trying to keep it friendly again. Sorry, guys. But you know where I'm going, right? Like, Shanks didn't necessarily have to legitimately overpower Kaido. He just had to do enough fighting to convince Kaido it wasn't worth his time to get rid of Shanks to finish making his way to Marineford, right? But it wasn't to stop a third party from getting involved, because Shanks himself ultimately got involved at Marineford. And what was the result of that, right? Like, the war immediately came to an end. Everybody, and I mean everybody, stopped. Nobody wanted that smoke in that moment. Evidently, not even the admirals? That one seems a little weird to me, right? Because, yeah, okay, cool. Ben had Kizaru right there, dead to rights, right? Light is faster than a bullet could ever dream of being. Kizaru was not in fatal danger in that moment. So why would the admirals bend the knee, as it were, when seemingly, honestly, let's take a look at the battlefield real quick, they just had the tides change decisively in their favor. You got a whole other pirate crew that is known to be rivals with the initial attacking crew. That's going to create chaos on the battlefield, right? All of a sudden, the Whitebeard pirates may not strictly be fighting Marines. All of a sudden, some of these Whitebeard pirates or some of the red hair crew might see each other like, oh, I want my rematch, get over here. And there's chaos, which ultimately results in a more beneficial battlefield for the Marines. So it didn't really make sense, strategically speaking, for the Marines to back off in that moment. But what could have been the result, you know? Let's say Shanks didn't get involved. He stayed to the side, because honestly, two Yonko tearing each other apart, like, assuming Shanks believed the rumor, right? Like, assuming that Kaido was going there to intervene, ambush Whitebeard or whatever, right? Two Yonko tearing themselves apart isn't a bad thing, especially to another Yonko. Like, okay, y'all gonna create a little bit of a power vacuum, but there's gonna be somebody there, and I'm already gonna be ahead of that fool, so I ain't even worried about it. As far as his own status and position in the world was concerned, it would have made more sense for Shanks to not get involved. So let's try to figure out what may have happened if Shanks had just sat on the sidelines and done his own thing. Kaido would have arrived at Marineford. Now, like I established at the beginning, there is no reason to believe that Kaido was coming to Marineford to ambush Whitebeard or take advantage of a distraction at the Whitebeard pirates' expense, right? It's more likely that Kaido would have attempted to establish some kind of alliance, even if it was just temporary, with Whitebeard for this war. Because this is a big moment, right? Like, okay, yeah, what one of the Yonko finally pulled the trigger. Like, we're going to war with the world government. Like, it's about to go down. Tonight it's getting real. I want to be there. Opening night. And I don't want to harp on it too much, but there does seem to be a mutual respect between these two. Sure, the Beast Pirates are a little more brutal than Whitebeard and his family usually are, right? But in a war, Whitebeard's smart enough to understand I might need the capabilities of people who can pull the extra trigger that I can't. So a Kaido Whitebeard alliance likely would have came from that. Now, there are some interesting implications there because Ace probably doesn't die in that situation. Like, Ace, with the Whitebeard pirates backed by the might of the Beast pirates, Marineford probably falls. At least one admiral probably dies. We're maybe even down a Sengoku or a Garp because, the Beast Pirates aren't going to stop just because Papa Newgate said, okay, I've accomplished my task. Ace is good. We got him back on the Moby Dick. Nah, that you're not caging the Hulk easily once he's unleashed, So it would have been brutal. But there's the potential, especially because, Ace had spent time on Wano. There's a chance he had made a connection with some of the maybe even middle to lower ranking Beast Pirates, right? Sorry, got to take a quick hydration break. So there's even the potential that some of the Beast Pirates themselves would have seen Ace like, oh no, okay, we got to go rescue fam real quick and then get back to the fun. So it's likely that Ace survives. I don't really think that takes away anything from the story, except for the fact now Luffy doesn't have a satisfying plot point to get him to where he realizes he needs to master Haki before really continuing any farther. And as we know now, Haki is an essential part of this final war that is on our doorstep at this point, right? But I found at the end of everything, right? At the end of all the digging, all the reading through old panels, honestly, reading through some of the wiki to try and remind myself of story events, I was left with what I found to be rather curious thought. The world government benefits the most from Shanks getting involved. Sorry, smash cut time. Gotta switch the page. We're heading on to the results. All right. Now, there are admittedly more than one conclusion that we can safely come to with this knowledge, right? Like, there's the possibility that Shanks' involvement was nothing more than a plot device. Oda wanted a quick way to bring the war to a conclusion, make sure Ace died because that was his planned Deus Ex, I guess, to make sure Luffy reached a place where he understood mastering haki is the only way he's actually going to get stronger at this point. But I want to make sure I note that in One Piece, plot devices generally become story points. To shed light on this, I'll use the Davy Back fight, right? Long Ring Long Land. A lot of us really didn't like it as kind of a write-off. Most fans would have told a new fan, hey, you know what? You can go ahead and skip this one. It's kind of weird anyway. Like, don't even worry about it. That's a little chunk of chapters you ain't have to worry about reading, or a little chunk of episodes you don't have to worry about watching. You're not going to miss anything. Turns out, yes, they were going to miss something, because that little plot device ended up coming back to be a story point. So even if it were just a plot device Oda used at the time, there's no reason to write off the possibility that it is also a story point at this time. But, moving beyond that, as I kind of mentioned earlier, there is whatever possibility, however much weight you want to put on it, there is the possibility that Shanks just legitimately believed Kaido was on his way to Marineford to attack Whitebeard, which would have also been bad for Luffy. Two people he respects personally. There's no long walk for a short drink of water to explain the respect there. As I established, Shanks has respect for Whitebeard. They dueled constantly, they drank together, and at least to this point, Shanks has minimum been trying to play the part of role model or mentor to Luffy. So there is the possibility that Shanks legitimately believed that Kaido was a threat to his friends. And that would explain it perfectly, right? Like, Shanks goes like, nah, Kaido, you need to shut this down. I'm not letting you get there. But going back to other recent revelations, Shanks was involved with the world government in admittedly an unknown capacity for an unknown amount of time, for some period at some point between the dissolvement of the Rogers Pirates, which, if I'm remembering correctly, was 24 years ago now, and 14 years ago. So that's a decade time frame there. And we do know 14 years ago he was still partially involved with the world government, because that's the time frame we have. 14 years ago he was chilling in that hot tub with Yasan, and we saw that tattoo. I'll try and make sure I got the screenshot right here just in case. So it's kind of curious, because at that time, I believe I pointed out online, I wasn't doing the channel just yet at that time, but at that time was also about a year before Luffy ate his devil fruit, before everything started going down for real, as it were. And I think the last point that I really found myself having to consider is where his crew stands on this whole idea, right? Because I'll have to do my best to find the interview, and if I do find it, I'll put a screenshot up here. But we've been told that Shanks's crew knows that Shanks is hiding something big from them, but they have so much trust and faith in their captain, they would continue to follow him regardless of what that secret turns out to be. And some of these are people that we trust personally, even beyond their connection with Shanks, right? Like talking about Lucky Roo and Ben Beckman. They're two people that a large portion of the community has connected with and feels like they can trust. So, Oda doubling down in that interview and confirming that, yeah, the crew knows something up, but they don't care. Like, Red Hair Shanks is their captain. They have complete and utter faith in this man. Kind of feels like Oda also telling us, like, guys, don't worry about it. Whatever Shanks goes through, whatever he does, there's a plan. And that ultimately brings me around to my conclusion. Now, as promised, I will make sure I timestamp this time at the beginning of the video, just in case anybody only wanted to see this part. Maybe you'll get the confirmation or comfort to watch the rest of it. I still trust Shanks. I still think Shanks is a good guy overall. I still think Shanks has Luffy's benefit in mind, the benefit of the world as a whole, even, right? Now, I still think Shanks believes in whatever dream Rogers told him about before he disbanded his crew. Whatever led Shanks to investigating the Figureland family and ultimately betting it all on this little knucklehead of a boy Luffy with the dream of a child. I still think he can be trusted, but because of his involvement and the fact that we can confirm it was rather deep with the world government, somewhere among the Imu Gorosei God's Knight level of involvement, even potentially just an apprentice God's Knight. We can't write off the possibility that as a plot device, potentially, Shanks is forced to play the bad guy by Imu or one of the Gorosei members. And because of that, I trust him at arm's length. And, I had a lot of fun making this one, guys. I'm really not trying to upset any of the fans. I want to be clear. I really like Shanks as a character. The fact 25 years later, he remains an enigma. This character we can continue to have these deep and intricate discussions about is something beautiful and something I really want to use to ignite discussion, right? And that's really the whole point behind this video. I'm not here to convince you Shanks is a bad guy. I'm not here to convince you Shanks is a good guy. I'm just here to remind you that Shanks is an enigma, and there are still so many exciting directions that Oda could take with this character. So I hope you guys had fun with this one. If you did, don't forget to like and, subscribe if you'd like. I do try to post every 2 to 3 days, keep things interesting and fresh. And as always, feel free to check me out on the socials, Barlo.b.theorizing on Tumblr and X. And I will leave a link to the Barlo Zone, my Discord community, in the bio. I hope everybody has an amazing day. Much love, friends.